Ever get that feeling? You're so close to harvesting, everything's picture perfect, and then bam, something's off. Like your plants are, well, rusty. Today, we're going deep on a garden threat that goes way beyond just looks. It's time to tackle plant rusts. And trust me, when it comes to these tiny fungi, there's a lot more than meets the eye. Luckily, we have expert speaker here. They'll be guiding us through the science, the symptoms to look out for, and get this, even some seriously high-tech ways to fight back. Solutions that go way beyond just grabbing any old fungicide off the shelf. Speaking of which, we're basing our deep dive today on this article from Farminaut. They're an agricultural tech company, really interesting stuff, and they're diving headfirst into this whole world of treating rust organically, which got me thinking, what actually causes those rusty spots we see? Is it like one particular fungus? Or are we talking a whole microscopic army here?
It's actually more like a whole order of them, the Pucciniales order to be
Yeah.
exact. And yeah, they're the main culprits behind those telltale rust-colored spots you see on plants.
An entire order. Wow, okay, so we're not messing around here. These aren't your average fungi just hanging out in the garden, are they? What makes these Pucciniales so, I don't know, so good at what they do?
Well, it's their lifestyle that's really fascinating. These fungi, see, they're what we call obligate parasites, meaning they absolutely need a living host plant to survive, can't grow on their own, can't reproduce. And that, unfortunately for our gardens, is exactly why they're so good at wreaking havoc.
So they're hitching a ride and basically siphoning off the plant's resources to survive. Talk about sneaky. And the article, it mentioned a pretty wide range of plants that can get hit by these rusts. I have to admit, I was expecting maybe a few common ones, but it seems like these fungi, they aren't picky eaters at all.
You're telling me it's easy to think, oh, rust, that's a wheat and barley problem.
Yeah.
But it goes way beyond that. I mean, we're talking everything from herbs, like oregano, you wouldn't believe it, to trees. Even specific species like maples are vulnerable. They've evolved, these fungi, to target such a huge variety of plants. It really makes them a global issue.
Okay, yeah, that's a little unsettling to think about. We're clearly dealing with a force to be reckoned with here.
And they're specialized too. Each type of rust fungus, it usually focuses on specific plants, or at least plant families. That's what, you know, it's kind of like know your enemy. You really want to catch those early warning signs.
Right, like what should we be looking out for if we think we might have a rust situation brewing in the garden? I mean, besides the obvious, is it really as simple as looking for, what, orange flags?
Pretty much. You'll see these, well, they're technically called pustules,
Mm-hmm.
and they can be yellow, orange, even a really deep reddish brown. Depends on the specific type of rust and, of course, what plant we're talking about.
Pustules. Gotta love the technical terms, right? So we're on the lookout for these pustules,
Mm.
but it's more than just a cosmetic thing, yeah? What's happening beneath the surface?
Oh, it's definitely not just cosmetic. Those pustules, they're packed with fungal spores,
Mhm.
just waiting to spread.
Oh.
And remember how we were talking about these fungi being parasites?
Yeah, they need a host plant to survive, right?
Right. And that's where the real damage comes in. You'll start to see the plant's growth get all distorted,
Slanted.
stunted even, like it's being drained.
Makes sense. It's stealing the plant's energy, right? To fuel its own growth. So we're watching for the pustules, the stunted growth. Anything else? Any sneakier symptoms we should know about?
Keep an eye out for leaves dropping too early. I mean, that can be a sign of a bunch of things stressing your plants out.
Right.
But if you see it along in those rusty spots, well, you might have your answer.
So it's like playing detective, looking for the clues, but let's say we catch it early, we're not giving up yet. Now, I'm all about that organic gardening life, as you know. So when it comes to these rusts, are natural remedies actually going to cut it? Or are we just delaying the inevitable?
I'm glad you asked that. Because honestly, organic methods, they can be incredibly effective. It's all about creating an environment where those fungi, they just can't get a foothold.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Can you give me an example?
Sure, take plant spacing, for example. Might seem simple, but giving your plants enough space, it does wonders for air circulation.
Right.
And that's key, because these fungi, they love it humid and stagnant. You disrupt that, and suddenly it's not so hospitable for them.
It's all about making them feel unwelcome. I love it. What about actual organic fungicides, though? Are those targeting the fungi directly, or is it more complicating?
There's a bit of both, actually. You have things like copper or sulfur. They've been used forever. And those, yeah, they directly go after the fungus, stop it from growing.
Right. Makes sense.
But what I find really cool are the organic solutions that actually work by kind of strengthening the plant's own defenses.
Oh, wow. Like giving the plant power to fight back on its own. How does that work?
Neem oil is a great example. It's a natural fungicide. It messes with the way the fungus grows, like it stops the spores from germinating and penetrating the plant.
Oh, so it can't even get started.
Exactly. And another one, potassium bicarbonate. That helps create an environment on the leaf that's less acidic,
Mm.
which the fungi don't like.
So between the air circulation, directly targeting the fungus, and then making it unwelcome, it sounds like a pretty good plan. Oh, and I have to ask about this because it sounds kind of sci-fi, but the article mentioned beneficial microorganisms. Like to fight rust, is that a real thing?
Oh, yeah, definitely real. And it's becoming more and more popular. It's called biocontrol.
Biocontrol.
Basically, we're introducing good microorganisms into the soil. And they help keep the bad guys in check.
Like a microscopic army working for our plants. So cool. What kind of microorganisms are we talking about here?
There are a whole bunch that can be helpful. One example is Bacillus subtilis. That's a bacteria that competes with the harmful fungi for resources.
So there's not enough left for the bad guys.
You got it. And then there are trichoderma species. Those are actually fungi themselves, but they're predators. They go after the disease-causing fungi.
Wow, it's like a whole microscopic battle going on for our plants. Instead of using a chemical fungicide, we're setting these little warriors loose. I love that.
It's pretty amazing. And the best part is, it's not just about targeting that one specific rust. By making sure you have a healthy, diverse microbiome in your soil, you're giving your plants the best defense system against all sorts of diseases.
It's a whole different way of thinking about plant health. Speaking of which, I have to ask about those plant-based solutions. I'll admit, I chuckled when I read about using garlic spray and horsetail tea for rust. Like, are we having a tea party for our tomatoes now? But seriously, is there anything to those old school remedies?
I love that you brought that up. It really shows you how much we can learn from traditional knowledge. Those plant-based solutions might sound a little out there, but a lot of times those plants have natural antifungal properties.
So there's actual science behind it. Like, how does garlic work against rust?
Garlic has a compound called allicin, and that's been shown to be a powerful antifungal. Basically, it disrupts the fungal cell walls, stops them from growing and spreading.
It's amazing what plants can do. And horsetail tea, that was the other one. I'm imagining like a tiny teacup for my tomato plants. So what's the deal with horsetail?
Horsetail's loaded with silica, and that's interesting because silica actually helps strengthen plant cell walls. Makes it tougher for those fungi to get in.
So it's like building a fortress, but out of silica. Okay, I like it. So we've got a lot of weapons in our organic arsenal, from how we space our plants to these microscopic warriors we can call in, and even brewing up some plant teas. But as cool as all that is, I have to admit, the article lost me a little at the part about satellites. Satellites and rust detection, that's not exactly what I picture when I think organic gardening.
It's definitely a different side of things, but it shows you how much tech is changing things, even in the organic world. And this Farminaut system, it's a great example.
Totally, but how does it even work? Are we talking about farmers with telescopes now?
Not quite. It's way more complex than that. It's all about hyperspectral imaging.
Hyperspectral imaging.
Basically, these satellites are taking pictures of farms, but they're using a way wider spectrum of light than we can see.
So they're seeing things we can't.
Exactly. And they're picking up on these subtle changes in the way plants reflect light. Changes that happen way before we can see anything's wrong.
Wow, it's like X-ray vision for your crops. And with rust, catching it early is key, right?
Absolutely.
So instead of waiting for symptoms, you're getting all this intel in real time.
That's the idea. It's huge for farmers, especially if they have a big operation.
Right, because checking everything by hand, that takes forever.
Exactly. This tech lets them pinpoint problems and target their treatments.
So they're saving time, money, and probably using less fungicide overall. It's a win-win-win. But it's more than that, isn't it? This kind of technology, it feels like a glimpse into the future of farming.
I think so too. It's all about using data to work with nature, and that's how we're going to grow healthier food more sustainably.
So well said. And it's amazing to me how something like plant rust, which, let's be honest, most people probably don't think twice about, can tell us so much about where things are headed. But that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We'll be sure to link to everything we talked about in the show notes, so if you want to learn more, check those out.
And if you've got any rust stories of your own, maybe you've tried some of those plant remedies we mentioned, we'd love to hear about it. Share them with us on social media.
Because whether you're a pro farmer or just someone who loves their garden, we're all connected by wanting to grow a better future. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into plant rusts. It might seem like a small thing, but as we've learned, it's anything but. Until next time, happy gardening.